If I told you that one of the darkest nights in Vatican history began with wedding bells, you probably wouldn't believe me, because this wasn't just any wedding. It was the kind that ended with a scream, a vanishing groom, and a chapel that was sealed forever. And the craziest part? It all happened 3 times in one night, right in front of witnesses who swore they saw the impossible. Welcome to the Vatican's darkest wedding, where vows turned into curses and love became something terrifying. Now, before we go further, here's a fair warning. This isn't a fairy tale. There's no happily ever after here. Only secrets the church never wanted anyone to know. Let's rewind to the night it all began. It was Rome, 1713. The Vatican was at the height of its power. Gold, art, music, and faith filled every corner. But behind those sacred walls, rumors whispered about forbidden relationships among the clergy. And that's where our story begins. Her name was Isabella de Rossi, a noblewoman known for her devotion and beauty, the kind of woman whose presence could silence a room. And the man she loved? Father Matteo, a rising star in the Vatican, young, brilliant, and trusted by the Pope himself. But there was one small problem. He had taken an oath, a vow of celibacy. So how does a priest marry a woman in the Vatican? Simple, he doesn't, unless someone powerful decides to look the other way. You can imagine how this must have sounded in 18th century Rome. A priest marrying a noblewoman inside the Vatican. It was a scandal waiting to explode. Yet that's exactly what happened. The ceremony was scheduled for midnight, deep inside a private chapel that had been locked to the public for years. Strange choice for a wedding venue, right? Almost like they didn't want anyone to see what was about to happen. As the clock struck midnight, the air inside the chapel was thick with incense. Candles flickered against marble statues of saints, casting long, trembling shadows. The guests, all members of the Vatican elite, stood silently, their faces pale, their hands clasped. The tension was suffocating. The bride entered, draped in white silk, eyes downcast. The groom followed, his priestly robe hidden under a cloak. He looked nervous, too nervous. The ceremony began. A bishop performed the rites, his voice echoing against the stone walls. But then, something felt off. Some guests whispered that the candles began to flicker without wind. Others said the floor beneath them seemed to hum, as if the chapel itself was alive. Still, the couple exchanged vows. The bishop raised the cross and declared them husband and wife. And then, the first shock. Just as the final words were spoken, the groom, Father Matteo, fell to his knees and confessed before everyone. "Forgive me, for I have sinned. I am already bound to another." Gasps filled the chapel. The bride froze. The bishop dropped his Bible. Wait, what? Already married? To who? It turns out, years earlier, Matteo had secretly married another woman before joining the priesthood. And worse, she had died under suspicious circumstances. The Vatican guards rushed forward. The bishop tried to hush the chaos, but the damage was done. Isabella screamed, tearing off her veil. Her white gown was stained with tears. And maybe, depending on who you believe, something darker. That should have been the end of it. But that was only the first of 3 shocks that night. Moments after the confession, as chaos filled the room, a chilling scream echoed through the chapel. One of the witnesses, a cardinal, had collapsed near the altar. At first, they thought he had fainted. But when they lifted him, his hands were covered in blood. No wound, no weapon, no explanation, just blood. Panic spread like fire. Guests tried to run, but the doors were locked from the outside. Now imagine that for a second. Locked inside a Vatican chapel. A man dead, a priest screaming prayers, and the bride crying uncontrollably. And just when things couldn't get worse, Isabella looked toward the altar and whispered, "He's watching us." Nobody knew who she meant. Some said she was hallucinating. Others swore they saw a dark figure behind the altar, half hidden in the candlelight. At this point, even the most faithful began to doubt what they believed in. By dawn, the chaos had turned into silence. The Vatican guards finally forced open the chapel doors, but Father Matteo, the groom, was gone, vanished. His robes were found neatly folded near the altar, with a chalice beside them. Inside the chalice, a red liquid. Some said it was wine, others whispered it wasn't. And on the altar cloth, 3 dark stains, in the shape of a ring. 3 times, 3 marks, 3 deaths if you count the stories that followed. The Vatican immediately sealed the chapel, erased all records, and swore everyone to silence. The bishop who performed the ceremony was reassigned to a remote monastery. Isabella, the bride, was sent away to a convent in northern Italy, where she lived in isolation for the rest of her life. She never spoke again. Centuries later, the chapel remains sealed. If you ask the Vatican about it, they'll tell you it never existed. But there's a strange detail historians can't explain. In old Vatican archives, a record from 1713 mentions a private union annulled after triple desecration. No names, no witnesses, just those words, triple desecration. And if you ever visit Rome, some guides will tell you that if you walk near that sealed chapel at midnight, you can still hear faint organ music and the sound of wedding bells that ring 3 times. Creepy. Definitely. True? Who knows? But every rumor, every whisper points to the same truth. That power, faith, and desire have always clashed behind the Vatican's walls. And sometimes, love isn't holy, it's haunted. Now hold on. Before you start Googling Vatican haunted wedding chapel, remember, the church has buried darker things before. But ask yourself, what would drive a man of God to risk his soul and a woman to stand beside him, even when she knew it could cost her everything? That's not just faith, that's obsession. And that's what makes this story unforgettable. Because here's where the story should end, but it doesn't. A few years ago, restoration workers claimed they accidentally opened a sealed corridor beneath the Vatican. Inside, they found a room filled with wedding relics, rings, veils, broken crosses, and one of the items listed was a blood-stained robe. The tag read, Matteo, 1713. No one knows if it's real, but the Vatican closed that section again almost immediately after. Coincidence? Maybe, but remember, history doesn't always delete the truth. Sometimes it just buries it deeper. So, what really happened that night? Was it a tragedy born of love, a curse from God, or a cover-up so powerful that even today, no one dares to speak its name? Whatever it was, the Vatican's darkest wedding remains a mystery, one written not in ink, but in whispers. And the phrase 3 times in one night still haunts the few pages of history that survived. 3 vows, 3 sins, 3 lives changed forever. Maybe love can move mountains, but that night, it shook the walls of the holiest place on earth. If you're still here, congratulations. You've just survived the Vatican's darkest wedding night. But before you go, let me ask you something. If forbidden love can destroy empires, imagine what time and patience can build. On the end screen, I've linked another video that'll completely flip your mindset. It's about the power of compounding, how tiny choices can shape entire destinies. Trust me, it's not about money, it's about legacy. Click it now, and let's see what your next chapter looks like.